Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this extraordinary council meeting as we look to adopt the long-term plan, 20 months in the making. We'll just well, first of all, welcome everyone in the chamber, but also those who may be watching the live stream. We have a postponement from the public forum from last week. We've got Wayne Murphy, who was scheduled to speak to us last week in public forum. We've arranged for him to speak to us today, so we do have that. But before we go to Wayne, we'll ask for any apologies, noting that we do have them from Councillor Linwood, Deputy Mayor Halalele. Anna is online, so that's all good. Councillor Ryan. We've got Councillor Cowles and Councillor Thompson also online. Any other apologies? Oh, Councillor McCone, sorry, is the other one. Councillor Holding, you're removing those. Councillor Blackliff, thank you. Those in favour of accepting those, say aye. It's carried. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. There are none, so we'll now go to Wayne Murphy. So welcome, Wayne. Welcome back to the Waitaki District Chamber. Right. Okay, can you hear us, Wayne? Are you able to hear us? Okay.
Hello, Wayne.
Hello.
You can hear us.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just having some technical issues at my end.
No, not a problem. So anyway, welcome.
Thank you very much.
The next 5 minutes is yours.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. There are a number of people around the table who know me, but quite a few who don't. So as a general introduction, I'm Wayne Murphy, and I had the privilege of working for the Waitaki District Council in several roles between 1991 and 2006, a long time ago now. In 2000, I was appointed to the role of policy advisor, and in 2006, I left that role to take up a role at the Wellington City Council. I've been away from Waitaki for almost 20 years now, and as Oamaru is my hometown, you'll appreciate that I've kept an eye on the news in Waitaki. But more than that, I've actually maintained property interests in Waitaki and Wellington and Poura over that period. So I'd say that gives me a perspective that may set me apart from many, if not all, other submitters that you've heard from. And I appreciate you're wrapping up your long-term plan at the moment. And just as a bit of an aside, I know you've struggled to manage rate rises over the years, but from where I'm sitting as a ratepayer in other jurisdictions, I think you've done a very good job in that respect. And I've seen my Wellington and Poura rate rises race away at a much higher rate than my Oamaru rates. I left Oamaru, as I said, to take up a role at Wellington City Council, doing similar work to what I did for Waitaki. And then I've since then held a number of senior government policy and finance roles. To summarise my experience over the past 25 odd years, I've done a lot of work in regulatory compliance, strategic planning, business plans, and along with all of that, a heck of a lot of numerical analysis. Currently, I am professionally involved in the Three Waters domain. With regard to the Waitaki water options, it's clear from looking at an officer's analysis that the community hates the council's preferred option. And as I noted at the end of my submission, I was pretty unhappy about being forced to rank the four options just to be able to lodge my submission. Evidently, I'm not alone in terms of concern about the options, and particularly the preferred option. And despite the fact that the most information that's readily available in the council's literature is about its preferred option, the officer's analysis shows that's the public's least preferred option. My approach when I was looking at the issue is to focus on the information that the council has provided and assess it on its merits. In some respects, I've treated it like a prospectus. And public investment finance is something that I've done for several years. For example, I was the lead budget policy manager at the Ministry of Education and during my time there, the list of new budget initiatives ran into the billions. So your prospectus, from my point of view, and having that experience, has too many gaps. There's insufficient data to support your preferred option, more particularly your preferred options benefits being realised. Most of the data that's represented in the literature that's available is presented as graphs, which for someone like myself isn't really a substitute for data for me to study. And when I find a table with actual numbers in it, I find it has an error in it, which is, of course, I'm referring to the estimated establishment costs for the new CCO, which has a table that has a total of $13 million, but when you add up the numbers, it comes to around 21 million. I realise that's a mistake, but still it reduces my confidence in the material. Now, coming back to the issue of my experience as a policy practitioner, in government, policy development is often led by people who have nothing to do with its implementation. And this can come unstuck when the optimism bias of the people who develop the policy run into the cold, hard reality of its implementation. When I was at the Ministry of Education, the then government decided to invest a vast sum into Pekinga, the mega polytechnic. It's been in the news recently, and it was found to be insufficient. It arguably didn't work, and now, as we all know, the current government is looking to undo that initiative. But closer to home at Waitaki, there was much that could be learned from the Network Waitaki's joint venture with Alpine Energy, which we also know was unsuccessful. These examples are salutary lessons in what lies ahead for Waitaki. You've published a prospectus arguing for a joint venture with 3 neighbouring councils. There are major gaps in how it would work, and the benefits between the preferred approach, which has so many uncertainties, are marginal when compared with the in-house option, which has far fewer uncertainties. You will find in my submission that implementing the preferred option will be painful. I'd say if you proceed with it, it'll be you're voting for Ling Chi, death by 1,000 cuts. Month after month of news about unforeseen problems, the establishment costs will be greater than you estimate. The price harmonisation issue, which is a point I made in my written submission, hasn't gone away, and there'll be a host of other issues that you'll have no control over. And every time there's a bad news story, you'll be asked by your friends and neighbours, what were you thinking? And because they're your friends and neighbours, they'll be polite. But most of the people that will be affected by this will be angry if you proceed down that route. On this point, let me share with you the pain and embarrassment that Wellington Water has caused its shareholding councils. Massive budget issues. Last year, for example, questionable procurement arrangements which have been reported this year, poor consumer satisfaction over repairs. And I'm not breaking any professional confidences on touching on these matters. These are just highlights that have been reported in the mainstream media. There are other factors that, oddly enough, give Wellington a much greater chance of succeeding with its joint venture model than exists with Waitaki's. In Wellington, there are local synergies that bring councils together. Bulk water is supplied by Greater Wellington Regional Council. Wellington and Porou are interconnected, as are Hutt and Upper Hutt for wastewater services. There is a concentrated but growing population, and so the presumed efficiencies from economies of scale, which is a major feature in your preferred option, are on the face of it really strong. But Wellington Water, just in the last few days, has forecast household water charges being $7,000 per annum by 2033. That's off the scale compared to yours. So by comparison, that alone weakens the claimed savings or benefits of economies of scale that is a feature in your proposal. If the 4 cities of Greater Wellington, with a population of 420,000 people, anticipate future annual household water charges that will dwarf Waitaki's, it calls into question where these efficiencies of economies of scale will come from. And when you take that away and consider the policy gaps that would be left for the establishment unit to resolve, there is a disconnect between the promised benefits and how the entity would actually deliver those promised benefits. So that is why in my submission, I, along with other submitters, say the preferred option just isn't credible.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, so we'll go to questions. The first one is just around Wellington Water. You've said about how Wellington Water is actually better than what we're proposing, but can you tell us your understanding of how it's actually worse?
No, I didn't say that. Actually, I didn't say Wellington Water is better. I said Wellington Water has been an embarrassment. And it actually has a lot of synergies that I don't see in with regard to your connection with your neighbours for your preferred approach. So they have some advantages that should make their approach really successful. Now, there's a lot of differences. You know, the state of their infrastructure might be much worse, which may account for the massive difference in terms of anticipated household charges. But they do have synergies that aren't evident in Waitaki's case with Gore, Central Otago and Clutha.
Yeah, I mean, there's big gaps between our northern neighbours as well. So some people have been saying that the South Canterbury option would be better for that reason, but there are big distances between populations around there. So do you see that as, first of all, do you see that as being any better, but also the challenge of how Wellington Water is funded? Do you not see that as being a major issue in their failure?
Well, they're moving towards, because they're setting up a new unit in Wellington, and I think we're getting away from probably the main thrust of my submission, but still I'll stick with it. That I think the issue with Waitaki in my submission is that I've looked at all your options, and I just can't see why you would go into a joint venture with a bunch of other people. You've focused on one, and I've addressed that, and you've raised some other prospects. There are a number of councils. I've looked at a number of different areas. Like, for example, recently I was looking at the situation in the Wairarapa. So different areas will look at what works best for them. I just can't see you'll get the benefits when you haven't. You know, one of the points I've just mentioned, the price harmonisation issue. In your proposal, you've said, hey, your preferred option is likely to be the lowest cost price for at a household unit level, but the price harmonisation issue hangs over that, and you've said, well, until that's resolved, the next likely thing is a different number than what's in your material. So that's quite confusing, and that's probably why. You know, that in my case, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but in my case, that's why your whole approach doesn't seem very credible. You can probably proceed a lot more confidence with your in-house model. And I also, one of the things I haven't actually seen any material on, but is a concern to me in my submission, is the tax implications of going to a CCO.
There are no tax implications according to the legislation, but we'll go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you very much for the submission, Wayne. I've got two very quick questions I'd be interested in. I think you said that you're currently involved as a Three Waters professional, and I'd like to know in what capacity.
Sure. I'm the compliance officer for Veolia.
For what, sorry?
I'm a compliance officer for Veolia. Veolia is a multinational that manages the 5 wastewater facilities for Wellington, Hutt, and Porirua.
Right, thank you. Now, you've talked about Wellington Water being an embarrassment, and cited a number of the widely reported failings of that entity. I'm just wondering why, therefore, the preferred option for the Wellington region appears to be a joint venture with all of the existing councils that currently contribute to Wellington Water, plus the regional council. Now, if the formula and if the current expression of the solution is flawed, surely the fact that they've opted for what they have would point to the fact that they see some conceptual merit in the idea of a joint venture.
Councillor, I'm not here to be an apologist for the options that Wellington has chosen, and so I'm not going to try and talk about something like that. I just say that there are some salutary lessons to be learned from trying to enter a joint venture. They have, as I said, some local synergies that are advantageous to them, but there's no denying, as you've just touched on, it's been a painful process, and so they're going from one kind of joint venture into another one, and it remains to be seen how successful that is. There's been a lot of tension around at the governance level around how Wellington Water has operated, and that's been publicly reported as well. So I once again come back to something I said, just in case anyone else is watching. I'm not breaking any professional confidences here. This is just stuff that's, as you just said, has been in the public domain.
Thanks very much, Wayne. We need to get back to our LTP.
Sure thing. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you taking the time and giving your thoughts on that. And I probably, just as a parting comment, I'd just say we're not looking to copy any failed amalgamation that's happened in the past. If we do go down the route of a joint CCO, we want to make sure that it's one that has every chance of succeeding. But we will find out whether we make that decision next week. So
yeah, sure thing. But just bear in mind, they never intended to fail either.
No, absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, we'll go to the council report now on the long-term plan. Hand over to Mr. Parmley.
Thank you. So briefly, this LTP has been developed, or long-term plan has been developed in the context of huge cost rises for local government, particularly around delivering new and replacement infrastructure, and also new higher regulatory standards that councils have to meet for drinking water and wastewater. And it's been a really challenging time for all councils. And I think it's fair to say this has been the toughest long-term plan that we've had to develop, with some really difficult choices in there to get the balance between investing in the critical infrastructure our district needs, the services our community wants, whilst also keeping things affordable as possible for our ratepayers, who are also facing other cost rises in their household budgets. So the biggest challenge really of this LTP has been around water. This government changed its approach to water reform, which cast some uncertainty around what would happen with water and kept water with councils, but whilst also still requiring councils to deliver higher standards in drinking water and wastewater. And this has put huge costs on every council and its ratepayers. Our transformation programme is helping us become more efficient and effective in what we do and how we deliver, but on its own, it doesn't provide all the answers in the face of the hundreds of millions of dollars required to be invested in waters over the coming year. So it's been difficult. There's been some difficult choices, but I want to thank the governance team for the many hours you spent on this, which have been far more than we originally planned, and way in excess of what you'd normally require to be put into an LTP. And also my thanks to staff as well for your work you've undertaken on this and the support you've provided in what has been a really challenging process. Particularly thanks to Mandy McIntosh and Amanda Nichols and your teams for what has been a huge shift that's been put in to get us to this point today. Through the LTP process, given what the work that's been put in, I think it's fair to say every part of the council, its services, projects and activities has been scrutinised in detail to look at how we keep costs down for ratepayers whilst also delivering the investment in our infrastructure, our district needs, and providing the services our residents value. And it's been difficult with some really challenging discussions and conversations, but I think it's been a real team effort between governance and staff focused on getting the best result for the communities under what are very difficult circumstances for councils. Our commitment as an organisation will be to continue to improve our efficiency and effectiveness so we can increase the value for residents and ratepayers and make every dollar go as far as possible in meeting our district's needs. I also want to thank Derek Olsen from Audit New Zealand and his team for the work they've done. I think the collaborative approach that they've undertaken with us is really appreciated, but more than that, it's really important in supporting openness to get to the right result, to give the assurances that our governance and community need from that audit process. So I think I'm going to hand over to Paul now, who's online, if you have any other further comments, and then go to Mandy just to highlight the changes that have been made since the original documents were published.
No, I don't have anything to add other than reinforcing the thanks to the various parties that have been involved in producing the document. But yeah, it is important to note the changes to the report that Mandy's going to talk about, and then just discuss with Derek the audit opinion and the matters arising from that. So really like to get on with that.
Thank
Mandy.
you. As Mr. Hope and others have noted, there has been some changes to the LTP document that was put in convene on Friday. And these changes were just changes that were recommended by Audit. So we've done those changes. Those changes are on your desk in front of you. There are some minor changes to the pages that were there on page 36, just a figure change. Page 69, just some footer moving, some page 116, change to the township amenity wording there and figure there. Page 117, a change to the figure there. Page 131, a change to refer to rating units. Page 135, change to total outstanding borrowings from 36 million to 34 million. Page 138, rates affordability graph access change to rating units. Page 139 was just a figure on the table that should have been removed, taking it out to 2035. And page 165 updated the roads and footpaths figures to reflect the financial strategy. So the process today, though, and that the LTP document is with the governance advisor here for adoption. That's been tabled there with her, and that does include the audit opinion that we've just received. And for your reference on your tables is also a copy of the audit opinion that we've just received as well. So it's appreciated that we've got that here for that meeting. Just as a bit of process, the recommendations that officers have put forward, I trust that the report has been read. But the recommendations there do need to be followed in order. That is part of the adoption process, that those need to be followed in order. Officers have put in the detail of that report some of the process that's been followed and some background there regarding the balanced budget, as well as the emphasis of matters. Have you got anything to say before we, at that point, with that in mind, I think it may be appropriate whether we go to audit now, whether Derek is there to talk to those matters that audit have raised as emphasis of matter and their audit opinion to you today.
Welcome, Derek.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you, Gary and Alex. Also, just to extend a thank you from my side to everyone that was involved in the LTP process. As Alex rightly said, I think it was a good collaborative process, and I think he also rightly reflected it was quite a challenging LTP with a lot of challenges. Similarly, I think we found it also challenging from an auditing perspective, seeing that there was a lot of uncertainties within the environment, specifically around the three waters and the challenges that posed. In terms of the LTP opinion, I'm glad to communicate that we are issuing an unmodified audit opinion, so no qualification. We did have, probably as part of our deliberations initially, there was an issue that we qualified initially, but changes were made to the financial modelling, and we were able to resolve that and take that through the OAG Hot Review ORC and settled this morning on an unqualified opinion. So that was a pretty good outcome. We are only left with two emphasis of matter paragraphs in the audit opinion, one specifically highlighting the uncertainties with regards to the water service delivery. Seeing that a lot of decisions will still need to be taken in line with the legislation that comes through, the secretariat that needs to approve it, decisions by other councils that want to form part of Southern Water done well. So all those uncertainties are just emphasized in our audit report. And then the other item that we are emphasizing is around your third-party funding, and there's uncertainty around that funding that needs to be that hasn't been contractually agreed at the date that the LTP is adopted. So other than that, again, just want to thank management and everyone involved in the LTP process. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Councillor Holding.
Thank you. Just in regard to the changes made that are on here, just what was the criteria for sort of major, minor, or medium?
Sorry, some of those figures that had changed through the financial tables, financial modelling that Amanda had been working with audit through, and just making those changes through, and we hadn't carried through those changes back to the actual document because just the modelling we hadn't picked up some of those variations. So the change of the 217, 247, 794 to 820, it was just the last version of the modelling, just making sure that that carried into the actual LTP document. And just the township amenity, we'll look at that when we get to the rates setting paper a bit more. We'll talk about that update there. And just some minor variations that hadn't been picked up from the latest version of the financial modelling into the LTP is really what it was.
Yeah, so I guess any changes that affect our debt forecast or rates forecast increase, we would have said was material, or anything like a significant figure, like over $1 million or so probably. But as she notes, like all those, like the first change there, 217 to 247 is a material change. Like we would have brought that to you if we changed project levels like that. It was just getting consistency throughout the document. So the financials didn't change. It was just making sure it was the same figure elsewhere in the document.
Right. Any other questions, particularly for Amanda, Mandy, or Derek? Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for Amanda and Mandy, but none for Derek at this stage. Thank you, Derek, for Audit's diligent and timely delivery of an opinion. It's wonderful to have it on June the 30th. That's hugely heartening, and thank you so much for that. Question one: if there's typos, where are they? Who do I take those up with? Well, tell me when. But now look,
After this meeting.
There are 4 pages where I think, in addition to the changes requested by Audit, I would like to suggest that the long-term plan needs to be amended. 3 of the pages relate to one issue, namely curbside collection. So if we go to page 57 of the long-term plan, it talks about, it says, despite the curbside collection service under the previous government, it indicated that all councils will be required to provide. However, in December, the ministry decided not to progress. Despite this, council will consult on the option of delivering curbside collection in the foreseeable future. That is not factually correct. Council is going to consult on the option of either maintaining the status quo or delivering. And there's a vote to that effect, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Ryan. So I would argue that that page needs to be amended. Page 164 of the long-term plan talks about issues in response within the first 3 to 6 years, compliance and reform, meeting community needs and expectations. The statement is council curbside collection service as a fact. That is not correct. No vote has been taken on that matter. And in my view, at the very least, it should say possible introduction of council curbside collection service. The final reference on that matter, and I think this one could perhaps stay as it is, but again on page 185, there's a reference to a key assumption: council will consult on a curbside recycling and food scraps collection service to households. I rather suspect, rather than bothering to amend that, if the other 2 are changed, it would be sufficient for the corrections to be made, or with sufficient correction, I should say. The other matter is on the very next page of the document, under 17, resource management, page 186. It states here, key assumption: the Resource Management Act 1991 will continue to be the primary mechanism for resource management over the life of the 2025-34 plan. That is not correct. The government has said, Chris Bishop has said, there'll be 2 new bills tabled in Parliament this year. They've repealed the Natural and Built Environment and the Spatial Planning Act, but they're introducing a Natural Environment Act and I think a Built Environment one. Roger may know the exact words. It is a government policy to change it. The RMA will not be, for the next 10 years, the primary mechanism for resource management, and I believe the document should be changed to reflect that. So those are changes that I would like to see in matters of fact in the document itself.
I'm happy for officers to respond, but it probably is something for Derek to make comment on potentially as well. Alex, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the RMA one. And the basis of this is firstly that, you know, that is the act that's in place, and we know the government has intention to bring about legislation, but we have to work on the basis of what legislation is in place. The plans the you know, government officials have shared with us in terms of the implementation of that, you know, the proposed legislation, if they get it through before the end of this term of Parliament, which, you know, there is, you know, concern, they are trying to do that. But, you know, following getting it through Parliament, their plan for an implementation and transition away from the RMA is a 6-year plan. So it wouldn't change things automatically. It's a 6-year plan to move away from that if the legislation is passed by the time this Parliament.
Respectfully, I heard the Prime Minister say in a radio interview today that the new legislation will be passed by the end of the year. But even if
can I just interrupt there? We go to Derek? If we were to add in there, leave the comment as it is, but add in there that we recognise Parliament may be changing legislation, is that going to be a material difference?
No, happy with that adjustment.
Okay. So I think we need to be speaking to our community that we're not charging on oblivious to what's happening elsewhere. So just recognising that is going to be sufficient. Thank you. Jim, your other points, you want some clarification on those?
No. I was simply going to say that even if that key assumption was changed, the Resource Management Act 1991 may continue to be the primary mechanism. I mean, you know, it's just the assertion that it will be for the next 10 years, I think, is very problematic.
Just on the consultation on the rubbish and recycling, curbside collections, that doesn't preclude the fact that an option would be status quo, and so that's. I don't know that I don't think it's wrong what it states, as long as officers recognise that one of the options that will be going out is the status quo.
Well, it is wrong to state on page 164 of the document that in the next 3 to 6 years we will be introducing a council curbside collection. That cannot be made as a statement of fact, because it has not been determined by consultation with the community that will happen.
Sorry, which page was that again? Any comments, Amanda?
I agree. We weren't being definitive about any decision. We're trying to be open that consultation would occur during the LTP. Happy to add the word possible ahead of that on page 164 if the auditor's happy with or potentially all of the 3 changes, page 57, 164 and 185, to be clearer that we still are to consult. We haven't landed on any decisions, and status quo could be an option.
So Derek, are you open to, is that going to be a material change?
Yep, now we're happy with those changes.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any other questions? Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. Prior to this meeting, I have raised some queries around the potential debt capping that's been spoken about, you know, around the country at the moment, and I'm a little surprised that hasn't
rates capping.
Rates capping. Yeah, sorry, what did I say?
Debt.
Sorry, rates capping. I'm a little surprised that it hasn't been addressed satisfactorily at this point, or volunteered up as a discussion point. But anyway, so I guess the issue is we've got the potential for rates capping, and we as an organisation, you know, over successive years have opted for unfunded depreciation on certain aspects of our organisation, and the issue could or might be that should we be benchmarked against a year we haven't had a chance to make the conscious decision to adjust for that or not, you know, we may find ourselves in a position of difficulty. So I'm just wondering, can you please provide some details around this and any perspective around what the impact of this could or might be if we are benchmarked against the year where we aren't able to consciously make a change in and around that?
Alex.
So just make a general comment. It sort of speaks a bit more to the point about the RMA reform as well. Whilst we're obviously scanning the political horizon as to what may be coming, we can only really respond to what we know is a firm proposal. And in terms of the rates capping, we know the government is looking at this. We know that things have been said about this, but there isn't a formal proposal that we can really respond to at this stage. And so, anything we did would be, speculative in that sense, in terms of being able to respond to it. It's clearly, in our thoughts, but it's not something until we see the proposals that we can actually then reflect in a long-term plan document. I think in general terms, there is a risk to every council that if an approach is taken with rates capping that takes the current year, that they will be might find that they're caught out in different ways in terms of how they've funded things or not funded things in previous years. I think until we until we have a proposal in front of us as to what the government wants to do, I'm not sure we can act on that within an LTP, because we don't know what the consequences will fully be.
So supplementary to that, I guess my question is, what have we ascertained, at least at a high level, what that impact might be? Should we be called out? And I get, I accept the point. It's not in place, but surely we need to have a strategy around what position we might take if it does become a challenge for us to address, or think about any potential ways to navigate our way out of that situation if it does become a reality ahead of time.
I agree, we will need a strategy and response to it, but it will be determined by what the proposal is. So, I've mentioned before, we know that they've looked at the UK rates capping model, and we know that they've looked at the New South Wales rates capping model. There are other ones as well. So the Victoria model is different to the New South Wales one. If it was similar to the UK model, which was a straight cap, penalised councils who had diligently worked to keep rates down previously and had a very low rating base as a result. If it's the New South Wales one, there are certain exemptions and notes in there that certain items aren't subject to the cap, or not subject quite as greatly to the cap. So it is very much in the detail as to how it's going to impact us. And until the government's indicated what that looks like, we can't really have a strategy to respond to it, because we don't know what we're responding to.
But acknowledge that it is a challenge, particularly if the government does do what has been suggested and introduce it before by the end of this financial year we're about to start. So that's a challenge. Just wondering, Derek, whether you've got any view on that, or whether you've seen any taking into account of potential rates capping in anyone's LTPs or annual plans?
No, at the moment there's nothing that we are focusing on in terms of that. It's probably very early stages. So at this time, there's nothing, even from councils that's proposing for amendments next year, nothing in terms of rates. So that's still very early stages.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I have a feeling in my waters, if the government's going to do it, the logical time for them to do it would be to coincide with the removal of waters from current council operations and assignment to different entities. It would seem to me to be emotionally and in terms of popular support or likely endorsement, the optimum time for it to happen. But I share Tim's concern. I also share Alex, Mr. Palmley's comment that it's pretty difficult to put anything in the LTP at this stage, because we don't, I mean, the government's dangling the carrot of rates capping, but they haven't even formally committed to doing it yet.
Okay, anyone else got any questions or comments? Just one more, Jim?
Well, just no, only one question. Look, I'll ask it when we come to the rates. I'm just curious to know where the rates resolution actually ends. Is it at what point on page 22 does it finish? But maybe you can tell us when you introduce that particular vote.
Okay, I'm happy to move the recommendations 1 through 9. So do I have a second? Councillor Hopkins.
Just ask, based on what we've had tabled to us today, the changes requested by Audit, do officers think that resolution 7 should read at the end, subject to audit clearance and at Audit New Zealand's request?
I think as far as subject to audit clearance, they've requested them, so I don't think that that's an issue. And Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, but we could put subject, at the request of audit, we could add that if that was something you wanted.
But that's part of their clearance.
Yeah,
They're giving the clearance
that's
with
it.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've provided our audit opinion, so effectively we've given clearance. You can include to say that it's subject to minor changes as agreed by council, but I mean, we've heard what those minor changes are, and there's nothing from our side that would impact those minor changes.
Well, actually, Gary, just to dot the i's and cross the t's, I'd move it subject to audit clearance and minor changes as agreed by council. If you're happy to move that, support that.
Right. Thank you. Just speaking to it, just acknowledge the long time that this has been on the go and the many hours that have gone into this from officers right across the organisation, in particular Mandy and Amanda and team, all of the work that you have done on this. So it's really very much appreciated. It's been challenging along the way. None of us have been happy with the overall result, but it's where we've ended up. And I just acknowledge that, what was reported as a 9.79% increase, which Duncan Garner slammed Councillor Hopkins on Saturday night at the celebrity debate. You can get back to Duncan and say it's actually 9.44% rate increase, Jim. So you can take that and give it that to him. Noting Wellington was 12.2%, by the way. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into getting to that point. It's still higher than any one of us would like, but it's probably below average overall. So that just indicates the extreme pressure that local government's on or under across the country. So thank you to all the councillors for your dedication and work on this as well. It's been a lot of frustration at times of pulling out here and trying to come to agreement on some of the issues. So thank you for that. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Blackler.
Thank you. I'll be abstaining from voting today, just on the basis of the concerns that I've just shared. I think I'm raising a concern of which the risk does need to be understood, quantified, and canvassed properly. I accept it's very, very late in the piece, but nonetheless, it's an important issue that, in my mind, needs to be addressed and understood. Also, I don't agree with the approach we're taking around unfunding water depreciation for 2 years as part of the transition, and I guess I'm probably a little concerned in wanting to understand whether or not it really was a financially prudent decision to have an unbalanced budget in year 2. So on that basis, I'll be abstaining.
Thank you. I think just noting that would have been an unbalanced budget in year 1 as well if we didn't take some of those measures. But we'll go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want what I'm about to say to be implied as criticism of staff. I commend staff on the work that they've done on this plan. But I won't be abstaining. I will be voting against adoption of the plan, and that is from the philosophical position that I believe we have not addressed the underlying problems that councils have, the imposition and without cost reimbursement from central government. And we, in this plan, have trimmed our cloth to the point that we expose risks going forward to our community. If there's major disasters, etc., we're going to have to find funding to fix it. So, as I say, I'm going to vote against. It is not a reflection on the magnificent job that staff have done putting this plan together. It's from where we are sitting in the local government space. We need to be telling our communities that we cannot continue to function and deliver to them with the expectations they have without actually facing how we're funded.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Hopkins?
Okay, I do feel that it's important to make the point that whereas I entirely agree with Councillor Thompson and anyone else who wants to say that the way local government is funded in New Zealand, well, you've been saying, a number of us have written in columns this year, the system is broken. Councillor Thompson is right. Government should be coming to the party. It should be actually helping to pay the bills for the services that it standards for which and the nature of which it is, in fact, in many instances, increasing. The whole question of unfunded mandates and things of that nature are immensely problematic. And I personally would prefer to see much greater autonomy and an infinitely fairer financial funding system for local government than is currently the case here. And I would commend that people look at compare Switzerland to ourselves in that regard. But the problem with Councillor Thompson's argument, if we all said, oh, the government's not funding us enough, so we won't vote for our long-term plan, the only people who suffer from that is us. We get penalised, we pay bills that we are fined, we are held to account for being allegedly incompetent. So the problem is real. The solution in this case, in my view, sadly, and I have a huge respect for Councillor Thompson genuinely, but I think in this instance, his solution is misplaced.
Any other speakers? I will just give write a reply because I don't think we've got the luxury of all just deciding we're going to vote against or we're going to abstain. We don't know all the answers, and that's pretty much the nature of business and councils these days. Legislation's changing almost by the day. There's new reports coming out from central government very regularly. There's suggestions of reform happening all the time. We live in an uncertain world, and the only thing that we can do is have certainty over the things that we do as far as what we think we should be doing. And that's what this long-term plan is about. So we don't know whether rates capping's coming in. We don't know what it's going to be like. In New South Wales, there's exemptions for activities such as water, stormwater, wastewater, and waste management. And it's amazing how many things that those councils over there find that fit under the category of waste management so that they can actually increase the costs of things to what they need to pay for them. It's a reality we live with. This long-term plan will be reset in 2 years' time. We will be doing an annual plan in 12 months' time. I don't like the fact either that we're not funding depreciation on water assets. It's going to leave a bit of a hole in that particular bucket, and we need to be very mindful of that. but it's been a way to help keep the rates down. The difference in rates would be that we'd be charging more. So I think there's been a lot of angst around a lot of those issues. We're trying to make the best decisions we can with the information we've got, knowing that it won't be perfect, but it will be better than not having a long-term plan at all. So with that, I will put the motion. So all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Thanks very much. And we go to the next item, which is setting the rates, which is the, as we note each year, the longest resolution we usually make. Who's going to speak to that one? Mandy.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. So again, in the handout that I've put in front of your tables today, on the back have been changes to the LTP document that was on convene. There has been some changes required to the rates resolution in consultation with Audit. And that with that, there's been a new rate schedule prepared, which has got three changes essentially. The new figure in there for the Township Amenity Western and the Township Amenity Western flat rate. And then there's been a correction to the wording of the water rates urban table, specifically correcting the naming of the Oamaru Water Handamaraki rural supply was the original reference to the Oamaru Water Handamaraki water supply. So those are the two changes, but we've included that full schedule there for your reference to support that resolution there for you. So
may I just ask, what wording amendments are you proposing as a consequence of the changes required by Audit or after consultation with Audit New Zealand?
as I just said, there were two changes to the figures.
So carry on, Mandy, please.
The two figures have changed there for the Township Amenity Western and the Township Amenity Western flat charge, and that's on the second page of that schedule. And then there's also been just under the water rates urban, which is the fourth page of that thing, just changing the name there of Oamaru Water. Previously it said Oamaru Water Handamaraki Rural, where it now is changed to align with the LTP and the correct title. So because it's water rates urban, we had referenced it incorrectly as rural in the original schedule in the agenda. It should just be Oamaru Water Handamaraki water supply, as it is referenced in the LTP.
So if one of us moved that council agrees to set the rates and due dates for payments as amended in consultation with Audit New Zealand, and to authorise a penalty, et cetera, would that cover?
I believe it would if Derek or Mr. Hope satisfied with that.
So if I can speak, yep, no. So just to clarify, Councillor Hopkins asked, where does the resolution finish? It finishes on page 22 about the decision objective. So you have been given a revised resolution and that is what you'll be voting on. It needs to have, basically you are passing everything on those 3 or 4 pages. That is the resolution. So you've been given the revised resolution and that's the one that you'll be voting on.
Thank you. So we're all clear on that?
I'm happy to move, Mayor Kitchen.
Okay, moved Councillor Hopkins. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Holding, thank you. Sorry, I'm just catching up on some of these bits here. Are there any comments? Anyone wish to speak to the motion? I did query some of the water charges, particularly the the relationship from the unit charges through to the cubic meter rate for those metered supplies, and got the response back. There was a wee bit whereas Amarama was higher in the unit price than Oamaru, the metered rate was less in Amarama than it was in Oamaru. So there were some things that don't quite match up there, and I've just signalled it as something for the next council to look at and review those metered rates and make sure that there's a fair distribution of cost between commercial and metered properties versus the house, the unit rated properties. Other than that, I think that was pretty much the main thing. So any other comments? I'll put it then. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That is carried. And that is everything we need to do. So with that, thank you very much again, everyone who's been involved with this. You can take a wee break from the long-term plan for a few months. You'll be welcoming that, but thank you very much, everyone. And with that, declare the meeting closed.